You know that little green circle on your phone? You probably tap on it every single day. But behind that simple icon is a wild, untold story of a global conquest. It's a revolution that started in the chaos of a broken industry and ended up changing how the entire world listens. This is the story of how that little green icon took over the world of audio.
To really get a sense of the scale we're talking about, you have to start with this number: 713 million. That is how many people use Spotify every single month. That's a user base bigger than the entire population of North America, all plugged into one platform.
So, the big question is, how did this happen, right? How did a small startup from Sweden outplay an entire industry, solve a global piracy crisis, and basically build an audio kingdom from the ground up? Well, that's the story we're about to unpack.
To really understand Spotify, you have to go back in time. Think about the early 2000s. It was the age of Napster, LimeWire, the Wild West of the internet. The music industry was in an absolute freefall, just hemorrhaging money because illegal downloading was what everyone did. The CD was on its deathbed, and honestly, nobody had a clue what was coming next.
It's right in the middle of all that chaos that two guys in Sweden, Daniel Ek and Martin Lorentzen, came up with a pretty radical idea back in 2006. They thought, what if we could build something that beats piracy by just being better, faster, easier, with a library bigger than anyone could ever hope to download? After launching in Europe in 2008, they went after the ultimate prize, the American market, which they finally cracked in 2011.
And this is the fundamental shift they created. We went from a world where we owned our music, buying CDs, paying for each download, to a world of access. For one flat monthly fee, suddenly, the entire history of music was right there at your fingertips. Now, this was more than just a business model. It was a total psychological shift. We stopped being collectors of music and became subscribers to an endless stream. The whole idea of owning music just started to fade away.
Okay, so with that model in place, the next phase was just pure, relentless expansion. What came next was a decade of growth so fast, so explosive, it left all the old industry giants completely in the dust.
The first huge milestone hit in 2011, the same year they launched in the US. 1 million paying subscribers. This was it. This was the proof that the whole idea could actually work. People were, in fact, willing to pay for music again.
But that was just the spark. The growth started to accelerate like crazy. In just 3 short years, by 2014, that number had multiplied by 10. 10 million paying subscribers. The snowball was getting bigger, and it was rolling downhill, fast.
And then, just 2 years after that, in 2016, they blew past a monumental number: 100 million total users. This wasn't some niche app anymore. It was becoming a global utility, almost as essential as flicking on a light switch for a whole new generation of listeners.
But Spotify's ambition, it didn't just stop with music. To truly dominate, they knew they had to conquer all of audio. This next chapter was all about a strategic pivot, transforming the company from just a music streamer into a full-blown audio empire.
And the engine that drives all of this growth is their freemium model. It's actually pretty brilliant when you look at it. You have this massive base of free users who listen with ads, and that creates a giant funnel. A certain percentage of those free users are eventually going to get tired of the ads and convert into paying subscribers. It's a machine designed to turn casual listeners into loyal customers. And then came the podcast gold rush. Around 2019, Spotify went on an absolute spending spree. They started buying up major podcast networks like Gimlet and The Ringer, and they signed these massive exclusive deals, the most famous one, of course, being for the Joe Rogan Experience. It was a calculated, aggressive move to become the #1 place you go for podcasts, period.
But here's the thing, that kind of dominance doesn't come for free. When you become the king of audio, you also find yourself at the center of some really fierce debates and high-stakes battles that challenge the very way your empire was built.
And that brings us to the biggest and most persistent controversy there is when it comes to Spotify: how artists get paid. This quote really gets to the heart of the problem. The system isn't a simple, you get this much per stream. And that's led to very public fights with huge artists like Taylor Swift and Tom York, who've argued the model just devalues their work.
This system has a name. It's called the pro rata model. So here's how it works in a nutshell. Spotify takes about 70% of all the money it makes, throws it into one giant pot, and then divvies it up to rights holders based on their share of the total streams. So, what an artist earns doesn't just depend on their own streams, but on every single stream happening across the entire platform.
And the fight for the top also meant a head-on collision with another tech giant, Apple. Spotify actually filed an antitrust complaint in Europe, basically saying that Apple's 30% App Store fee is an unfair tax that's designed to hurt its biggest competitor, Apple Music. Apple's defense? Hey, the rules are the same for everybody, and by the way, you built your whole business on our platform. It's a clash of titans, billions of dollars are on the line, and that battle is far from over.
So, after conquering music and making a huge play for podcasts, where does the king of audio go from here? Well, the company's vision seems to be to move beyond just playlists and into pretty much every corner of our listening lives.
You can actually see their roadmap pretty clearly right here. It all started with curating music with playlists. Then it was all about locking down exclusive podcast content. Now, they're integrating audiobooks. And the next frontier? It looks like it's going to be all about AI, using it to discover and recommend not just what you want to hear, but what you will want to hear next.
And all of this brings us to one final big idea. You know, Spotify's greatest achievement wasn't just building an app. It was completely rewiring our relationship with culture. It shifted us from a world of ownership to a world of access. And that leaves us with a really powerful question for the future. After teaching an entire generation to rent its music, what will it teach us to rent next?